All right, before we start Unit 2, we are going to be wrapping up Week 5. As you know, you have your Unit 1 test this week, as well as the answers to your review. We are going to also do a little bit of basic review to get you ready. So this lesson, the objectives are just to review some key vocabulary terms, to practice using properties of real numbers, to simplify and solve equations, and just review, review, review. So hopefully if you get to a point where you want to try something on your own, you will stop this and try it, or you can stop this video and take some notes about key terms. So key important vocabulary that we have going into Unit 2. Unit 2 is getting into our advanced algebra. We are done with statistics. A couple things that you need to be aware of. You need to know what an expression is. An expression is just a math phrase, like 2x plus 3. Say, for example, I'll write that up here. 2x plus 3. Okay, that is an example of a math phrase. There's no equal sign in there. It's just an expression. It can contain numbers, as you can see, the 2 and the 3. It can contain variables, like the x, and it contains operators, like plus or minus. Okay, and that is just an expression. We don't solve expressions because there's no equal sign, but we can simplify them or evaluate them. Next up is an equation. Equations do have equal signs. It's an algebraic expression, just like we wrote above, only this time it is set equal to something. So given that above example, we might say, okay, 2x plus 3 is equal to, and we'll say 11. And then you could go ahead and solve that for x. Or maybe that's an expression that you set up to be equal to something in order to find an unknown. Third is a term, and that is just part of an expression separated by operators. And remember that operators are plus, minus, multiplication, and division. Okay, and your term is something like 2x or the 3. So let's do that in here. Let's give some examples. So your term is just going to be maybe the 2x. Okay, that's a term. And the 3 is a term as well. The coefficient is the number that is always multiplied by a variable. So in this example, the 2 is a coefficient. The 4 is a coefficient. In the previous example, you can see there's the 2, that's your coefficient. That number is always multiplied by a variable. So we only call it a coefficient if it's sitting next to an unknown, like x or y or z. A variable is a symbol that represents a quantity that can change, like the x, the y, the z. Okay, it's unknown, and it depends. Sometimes it depends on another variable. In your linear equations, y equals mx plus b, the y and the x are your variables, and depending upon what x is, the y will change. Finally, we have a power, and a power is just your exponent. Okay, so maybe I have, say for example, 4, and I'm going to raise it to the third power. The 3 is your exponent. Okay, that is your power. All right, so those are very important terms to be aware of and understand when you read the problems in advanced algebra. Often they use those terms, and you need to know what they mean in order to complete the problem. Okay, so let's do a little review. Let's check and see how you did. So in this following expression, what value is the coefficient? Is it the 3? Is it the x? Is it the 2? Is it the 4? Is it the 5? So if right now you're saying, oh, it's the 3, you are exactly correct. The 3 is the coefficient. Okay, so the 3 is your answer. And let's go ahead and circle the 3. That is the value of the coefficient. All right, let's do some more sample problems. So let's practice using our exponents. We are given some expressions here. Let's rewrite these using powers, because this is really long and difficult to write. So if we use powers, That'll be a little easier. So up here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nines. So I can write 9 to the 5th power. Down here I have 2 of the 2 times x's, and I have 3 of the 4 times y's. So if we write these out, then what I have is 2x squared, because I have 2 of them, times 4y cubed, because I have 3 of those. Okay, so let's write that out here. How many 2x's do we have? We have 2 of those. How many 4y's do we have? Well, I have 3 of those. Okay, on to the next example. Notice that the minus sign is inside the parentheses, so it's connected to the 3. Well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those. So the way to properly write that is use your parentheses and write, oops, not 5, write 3. So what we have is, okay, minus 3, and we said we had 5 of those. Okay, and that's how you would write that. You want to be careful, though, to keep that minus sign inside the parentheses with the 3, so that you know each time you are multiplying negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3, rather than negative 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. So if you put the minus sign out front, that is exactly what you would be doing. Like in this last example, we have a minus sign out front. So we would write that a little differently. We would leave the minus out front, and then we would write our 5z, and how many do we have? You can see that we have 3. So that's a little different than the one above. Let's do a few more sample problems. Let's go the other way. So now we're going to expand the power. We have 6 to the 3rd times x squared. Well, based on the last problem, we know that then we have 3 6's. So we have 6 times 6 times 6 times 2 x's, x times x. Okay, and that's as simple as that. We're expanding it. In the next example, we have 4 x's. That's 4, so we would write x 4 times. And it looks like we have 2 y's, so you would write y twice. Okay, now here's a little bit of a tricky one. We have a negative times 7 squared. So what that means is we only have one negative because it's not in a parentheses with the 7. And then we would write 7 times 7 together in the parentheses. You might think that the ending result of this is positive 49, negative 7 times negative 7. However, that would be incorrect. It's actually negative 49 because that negative is by itself, it's not connected to the 7 since it's not in parentheses with the 7. So we would do 7 times 7, which is 49, and then multiply it by a negative, which would give you negative 49. Okay, and that's going to be different than this bottom one because the negative is in the parentheses. So in this case, we would actually write it as negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 4 times. Okay, so each time on that problem, you would be multiplying the negative 3 times the negative 3, not 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. All right, so let's start to wrap up. We have another one, and I think this might be our final sample problems to get you going, so let's give this one a try. It's got a little bit of everything. Okay, now remember your order of operations. Don't forget that. We will write that on the top up here. We have PEMDAS, parentheses, exponents, then your multiplication and division, and then your addition and subtraction. Remember that your multiplication and division don't necessarily go in that order, they just happen next. Same thing with the addition and subtraction. So when you get to the multiplication and addition and subtraction, you always go left to right when you are solving in that order. Okay, so our first problem, we have parentheses and we have exponents. Okay, well remember that if we look at PEMDAS, we need to do our exponents first. So if I'm going to solve this, it's very easy to solve if you do it step by step. Okay, don't try to do it all in your head at once, especially if you're not that comfortable with this, because you're likely to make a mistake. So I'm going to do my exponent. So I have -4 twice. So that's -4 in parentheses times -4. Well, if I put those together, I get +16. Now this minus is out here, that stays there, but then out here I'm going to go 16. Okay, next I'm going to do, sorry, I did the exponent first. I should have probably done the parentheses, but in this case we could do either one because they are separated by a negative. But let's go ahead and do the parentheses next then. So you have -4 minus 1 minus 5 is -4. And then actually I would have done the exponent next, but I would still get the same result. Okay, now we're just left with our addition subtraction. So just like we said, we want to go left to right. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to say, well, I have -4. And then I'm going to do this, minus a minus. That gives me a plus. And then -16. Okay, and then -4 plus 4, that gives me 0. -16 equals, we'll say 0 here, -16, and that just equals -16. All right, on to the next. Okay, so let's look at our parentheses. In this case, it's very important to do the parentheses first because we do have an operation going on inside our parentheses. So we cannot do exponents first in this situation. Okay, so if we look at our parentheses, we have 7 minus 6. Well, that's easy. That just leaves us 1 cubed. Okay, to the third power is cubed. Plus 15 divided by, and let's do our 3 plus 2 divided by 5. All right, we have done our parentheses. Now we're going to do our exponents. Well, 1 to the third power, that's just 1. Then we have plus 15 divided by 5. Be very careful that you don't just go left to right yet because you still have division. If you did, you would get the wrong answer. Most people might be tempted to do 1 plus 15 and then divide by 5. We still have the multiplication division. That comes next in the priority level. So we're going to write the 1 and the plus because we can't do that yet. And then we are going to divide 15 divided by 5, which is 3. Now we can do our addition subtraction and we would get 4. As long as you follow your order of operations, you'd be in good shape. Alrighty, let's do the last problem here. Again, we do have some parentheses, so we need to take care of that first. So I will write -3 times 2 times 2, and then we have our parentheses. So a -3 minus 1, remember that you can make that a plus, change that sign, and what you really have is that you're adding two negatives together. So -3 plus a -1 is going to give you -4, and that would go here. Now we have multiplication, and we have no addition and no subtraction, just multiplication. So we would go from left to right. -3 times 2 is -6 times 2, and I can do times 4 with the x, or I can leave it in parentheses, same thing. But since there's a negative in front of the 4, sometimes it's easier to leave it in parentheses. Okay, let's continue to go from left to right. So -6 times 2 is -12 times -4. And my final answer, -12 times -4, two negatives together make a positive, and that gives us 48. Okay, those are just some basic skills that you guys are going to use in this chapter. So I just want to make sure that you are all comfortable with that. I do actually have one final slide for you. So let's go through that, and then you will try some on your own. All right, we're going to do two things. So make sure you read the directions always. In this case, the first one we're going to solve. All right, remember, and you can try this on your own, this isn't -3 times -3. This problem is really -3 times 3. So if we look at what that is, the negative is out front, and we do the 3 times 3, which is 9. Okay, so be careful where that negative is. If it was in parentheses with the 3, then it would be negative 3 times negative 3. All right, last one. Here we have negative and then 4 times negative 4 times negative 4. So if we go from left to right, we actually do in this case have a negative in front of the 4. We can multiply that, we get negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16 times a negative 4. So our final answer will end up being negative 64. All right, and that concludes this practice. So give the practice in the week a try and then go to your test.